Hi guys! Today I'm going to show you how to disassemble the Valvetronic unit from the N42 or N46 engine. As you can see, I already have the Valvetronic bracket out. This is because I'm doing a repair on my engine because one of the torsion springs broke on the Valvetronic. So this is in a separate video. So I'm going to put the link to the video somewhere here at the top or down in the description. So if you are interested in diagnosing this issue and how to fix it, then just click on that link and see the videos there. I've ordered new Valvetronic springs, and in the meantime, while I wait, I figured, hey, why not just disassemble the whole unit and just clean it out? As you can see, it is really dirty. The oil is really baked onto it. Now that doesn't really hinder the performance, but you know, while I'm here and I wait, I might as well disassemble everything and give it a good clean. So you know, you can't be making videos on a dirty engine like this. So as you can see, the Valvetronic is in fact out, and I just used a bunch of zip ties to keep everything together. So this is the way you can disassemble or remove this bracket from the engine head without losing any of the intermediate levers. Those are the levers here. And there are toolkits you can buy that have all the special mounting brackets and special tools to compress the Valvetronic springs and mount this whole assembly right level. And I mean, it's really good to have that tool, but I don't have it and I'm really cheap. So I always figure something else out. So today I will not be using any special tools, just the tools I have here in my tiny garage. And what I will use is just a piece of normal 6mm bolt together with a washer and some extra bigger nut. This is just to give me a point where I can attach the vice grips and compress the spring to get it out. So I'll be using this, and I will be using vice grips that are kind of wide. So as you can see, I could really open the vice grips, and when I compress them, they just kind of slide together. So you have a really big range of motion here, and these vice grips do a really good job on the springs. So when you're working on the Valvetronic, make sure that you work on a clean surface. Well, this is as clean as it will get here. Also make sure you don't damage anything. As you can see, you have oil lines going here, and you also have this Valvetronic servo motor here. So make sure you don't press too hard against this, otherwise you may break something. So I'm going to put a piece of cloth underneath just to spread the load, and then we'll start removing the Valvetronic springs. Okay, this should spread the load a little bit. So the springs are screwed here at the side of the Valvetronic bracket. So first thing what you have to do is just loosen the bolts. I will loosen them to about 10 millimeters because they are 15 millimeters long, and so that still leaves you with 5 millimeters of thread, so it's safe, so you don't damage anything. So this is a T30 Torx, and I'm just going to break them. Okay. Now I'm going to use just a normal screwdriver with the Torx pattern, and I'm going to loosen them for about 10 millimeters from the Valvetronic bracket. Okay. This will relieve some of the tension from the springs, and that will make it a bit easier to remove. Okay. Now I'm going to use this bolt and this thingamajig and just insert it here. So, well, let me show you on this outer one. Now the vice grips, they have these teeth and they engage with the bracket on the spring. So as you can see, when you are compressing the spring, it kind of hooks to the bracket, and it's a kind of a, well, it's not too safe, but it's manageable. So now I'm just going to compress the spring a little bit, making sure that it's nice and secure. And then I'm going to use my left hand to compress it. Make sure you have a good grip. And then you compress it and just release the screw all the way out. So here is the bolt. And now you have to slowly and controllably release the spring. You can use your fingers to press down on the spring because it wants to fly out in this direction. So just be careful because the spring is still under some tension. Okay, here it goes. And the spring is removed. So this is the first spring. And now we just go to the next one and we repeat the process. So first, compress the spring a little bit, make sure that everything is nice and stable. And then you slowly release it. Okay. And the spring number 2 is out. Now let's do the same for number 3. Again, slowly release it. And if it jumps out, well, it's not under that much tension. So the first thing that you will probably notice if your car is older is that the springs are really, really worn out. So if I take a look here, so all the springs are really, really worn out. And this is something that happens when the engine gets older. Now this particular engine only has 200,000 kilometers on the odometer. I don't think that's too much because the car is quite old, almost 20 years now. So yeah, even if you don't drive it that much, the springs still get kind of worn out. So I'm going to put the springs aside. So this is our step 1, removing the springs. If you are doing this on your Valvetronic unit and the springs are still okay and you don't plan to replace them, I would suggest you always mark them and put them back on the same spot. This way you can debug stuff later. If anything weird happens, you always know where it started. Now it's time to remove the intermediate levers, and as I've told you before, all the intermediate levers are nicely secured to the bracket. So I hope you can see how the zip ties are routed. So they have to go over the oil line and around the eccentric shaft, and then they have to go underneath this bridge here on the intermediate lever. I hope you can see. And then they have to go around to the other side. So this is the correct way to secure the intermediate levers using zip ties. If you are using the special tools, they come with the special brackets that you attach, and they basically clip on and hold the intermediate levers in place. So that's a bit easier, but this is much cheaper. So, okay, now that I've shown you how to secure them, I'm just going to start removing them. One very important thing is to mark the intermediate levers so they always get installed back on the same spot. Never change them or switch them, because they are mated to the surface, and again, as with the springs, make sure that you put them back on the same spot if you need to debug anything later. So yeah, let's start removing the zip ties. Let me see if I can do it from here. Okay, so this is how the intermediate lever looks like. So this is where the spring sits. This is what presses down on the rocker arm, and that opens the valve. And you have a couple of rollers that have to roll on the eccentric shaft and on the camshaft. So this is my number one. So I'm going to mark it and put it in a box so it doesn't get dirty or switched up. Now I'm going to remove the intake camshaft. Okay, now it's time to remove the zip ties on the front side. So I'm just going to undo this screw here. Okay, and the intake camshaft can now be removed and safely stored away. Now we can turn it around and work on the top side. So first I am going to remove the Valvetronic sensor. Now one of the bolts is already removed. This is a 10mm bolt. Here is the Valvetronic sensor. I think that this is one of the most expensive sensors in the whole car. I think it costs about 170 euros if you don't buy it from BMW, but you buy it directly from VDO, which is the OEM manufacturer of this sensor. So here you can see Hall effect sensor that senses the position and sends it back to Valvetronic computer. Or if you have N46 engine, then it sends it directly to the ECU. And here are the magnets. And the magnets send a signal to the sensor. Now we can remove the oil line. You just basically unclip it. you have to be careful not to bend it. So here is the oil line. We're going to clean it up and make sure that it's not clogged or anything. Now we can remove the servo motor for the Valvetronic. Again, just 10mm nuts here. And then we can just take it out. Here you can see there is a gasket. So if you have oil in this area, then it's a very common oil leak, this gasket here. But the procedure to replace it is not that hard, but you will have to remove the valve cover to remove it, obviously. So now is a perfect time to replace it. And then I used a piece of wire to clean out the bolt at the center. Make sure that it's nice and clean so the hex key engages perfectly with the screw there. So this is aluminum wire. So as you can see, there is some dirt there. I will try to clean it out. Now let's see if the Allen key fits. I think it fits. So this eccentric shaft has a limiter here, so it cannot rotate more than this. So make sure that you put it in this position, and then we should be able to remove that bolt. Okay, so the magnetic sensor is out. As you can see, there is quite a lot of dirt here. Now this is a good indicator of what's going on in your engine. If you have metal particles, they can end up here on this magnet. And as you can see, I definitely have some metal parts here. I mean, it's not too bad, but it's there. I will, of course, be cleaning everything, so it should be nice and clean for reassembly. Now let's remove the bearing cups. And the eccentric shaft is out. This is the one component that can give you a little bit of issues, and when I mean a little, I mean a lot. If the half lobes get used, so if you have a lot of wear here on this edge, especially this edge here on the idle position, the engine may hesitate during the acceleration because it just doesn't open the valves enough to accelerate. So in that case, if you see excessive wear here on the lobe here, then you will have to replace it, and this is really expensive to replace. So let me put this aside. Now it's time to start cleaning everything. So I'm going to use a toothbrush from the Sam Craig Stepmom and some general purpose degreaser, and I should be back with the cleaner Valvetronic bracket. I've cleaned all the parts. As you can see, everything is nice and clean compared to what it used to be. This literally took more than 3 hours to clean by hand. So yeah, I guess I did put some love into this engine. Now let's start reassembling the Valvetronic. First we have to put back the eccentric shaft, so I'm going to put a little bit of oil on the bearing shells. Now I'm going to put the needle bearing shells back in place. Make sure that they are oriented correctly. As you can see here on this bearing shell, the groove has to match, so don't turn them around, that will not work. Okay. Make sure that all the shells are nicely seated. Now I'm going to put some oil on the surface and I'm going to put back the eccentric shaft. Okay, now ideally you would change the needle bearings, but I forgot to order them. I didn't plan to do this, so I'm just going to reuse the old needle bearings. From the feel of it, they look okay. They don't have any hiccups, so I'm going to reuse them. Maybe at a later time I will replace them if I get into the Valvetronic again, but for now they will have to do. Okay, now I'm going to put back the top bearing shells. Again, they are marked, so this is the E4, which means this is the last one. I'm also going to put a little bit of oil on the surface. Now I'm going to put back the nuts. First, I'm just going to make them hand tight. Make sure that everything runs nicely. I'm not going to tighten them down just yet. I'm going to wait until the Valvetronic is back on the cylinder head when the stud bolts come here through the bracket, and then I'm going to slowly tighten them down because the shells from the needle bearings, they have to kind of slide into position, and as you can probably see, the top bearing shells still have a little bit of play. So yeah, I'm going to tighten them down later. Now I'm going to put back the magnet for the sensor. If you look here, there is a key, and this key must fit into the end of the eccentric shaft. So here you can see the key, and this has to fit in like this. Now I'm going to tighten down the bolt. Okay, this bolt has to be tightened down to 8 Newton meters. I just realized I forgot to put back the brackets for the oil line, so again I will have to now we can put back the Valvetronic sensor. And we have to tighten that down to 8 Newton meters. Now we have to put back the Valvetronic servo motor. Again, replace the gasket. Mine was replaced 2 years ago, so I'm not going to replace it now. I think it's still okay. When you're putting back the servo motor, just make sure that the connector is pointed at the top. So it has to go in like this. And then we torque it down to 10 Newton meters. Okay, now put back the oil line. Okay, and now we can put back the banjo bolt on the oil line. And then we torque it down to 10 Newton meters. Now we have to put back the camshaft, and to secure it, we first have to put back the bolt that holds the zip ties. Now I'm going to clean the surfaces and put some fresh oil in there. I'm going to make sure that the camshaft is oriented correctly, so this elongated part must point towards the top. So it has to go in this orientation. And now I'm going to use zip ties again to secure it. I'm going to try and reuse the previous zip ties. Now I'm going to put back the intermediate levers. I'm going to make sure that I've put them back on the same spot, and also I'm going to secure them with zip ties. The intermediate levers are all secured with zip ties. Okay, so to install new springs, we just basically have to do the disassembly in reverse. They have to be fitted in like this. And then I have my bolt ready and the T30 screwdriver. Now I am going to compress the spring. Make sure that you have a stable grip. And now that the spring is compressed, we should be able to insert the bolt. Okay. Now all I have to do is finish tightening the bolt. And the new spring is in. And now we do the same for the rest of the springs. And now all the springs are in, and all we have to do now is torque the bolts to 10 Newton meters. Now I'm going to check that all the intermediate levers are nicely aligned, so they don't move. Okay. As you can see, this one was a bit out. Okay. Just a quick note, when working on the Valvetronic without using the special tools where you can mount the whole bracket in nice horizontal position, just be careful, don't damage the plastic sensor. If you turn it around, it's very easy to break because over time it is brittle, and yeah, you will break the connector and then you'll be in trouble. So just be very careful when handling the whole assembly. I think that this Valvetronic is now ready to be put back into the engine.